Hey everybody. I haven't really done a video like this in a couple of years, maybe a year and a half. I think the last time I talked about something like this, but with the announcement that at E3 this year, Nintendo is going to be revealing the new Wii 2, or the successor to the Wii, which apparently, according to reports, is supposed to be stronger, better, and more advanced, I guess, than a 360 and a PS3. In other words, it's supposed to have stronger RAM, bigger gigabytes, stuff like that. And I think it's supposed to probably involve high definition in a big way. Possibly 3D, but there have been reports that deny that it's not going to happen. According to other reports, the controller for the new Wii successor, the Wii 2 as they call it, is supposed to have like maybe a screen on it. Kind of like what you see with the original Dreamcast controller. But you don't have to put a memory card in the controller. The screen's right there. But it's kind of funny though, folks. It's kind of funny how far we've come from a Wii. We've come from the Nintendo, when it originally first came out in '85, all the way now to basically within a year's time, within the following year, according to many sources, having the successor to the Wii, which is supposed to be more powerful and stronger graphic-wise, RAM-wise, gigabyte-wise, I guess, and high definition-wise than 360 and PS3 combined, or at least that's the way reports go. But it's hard to believe that back in 2006, this came out, and this was the big thing. Then around that time, if not before, 360 came out, and then about a few years later, the PS3. And just like Sega had done to Nintendo in the past, they blew Nintendo out of the water for a while because we couldn't compete with the level of gaming that the 360 and the PS3 were pumping out. Now the Wii has made a huge comeback in many aspects. The Wii has some titles on there that you can't get anywhere else. And believe it or not, Wii has not only made a comeback, but they have basically forced, in many people's eyes, PS3, Sony, and Microsoft to basically go in that same direction. Now, I know some people watching this will deny that and say, well, Wii's always been in front. Wii was always the best-selling system. Well, of course it was. It was the cheaper system. But it wasn't just that made it a success. It was the fact that you were involved with the games. You would basically hold a remote like this, and when you would have to do this, like I have the Mario and Sonic Olympic Games game, right? The first Mario and Sonic Olympic game. So, let's say with the archery event, I could do this now, and it makes it feel like I'm doing it. Right? Now, Sony has done this with the Move. They feel that, well, they got to do something similar. Now, what they say they've done is they've gone a step further and wanted to make people feel more involved with it. In other words, their sensor bar has a camera on it, just like the Kinect. And what happens is you have the controllers in your hand, but you're not just playing as an avatar or anything, you're playing as yourself. You see your actual self on there. Now the Kinect is very similar, but the difference is, which makes it a little, I guess, a bit better in some eyes maybe, than the Wii and the PS3, is it's hands-free. You don't have to do anything. All you have to do is get your body scanned for the game, and then basically away you go. Now some people may say there are certain games out there for the Kinect that are good, and then some will say they are bad. Like for example, Sonic Free Riders. Angry Joe basically has come out and said he doesn't like it because it makes you sick. Basically you got to do this all the time. You got to balance, and it's kind of hard. But anyway, getting back to what I'm saying it's kind of funny how far we've gotten so far from that. It's even more funny, portable game-wise, how we've gone from the, well, you remember those games that used to sell in the stores, those little graphic games, like those games that were little, you put batteries in and you see these little dots on there. It's like one game's a football game, one game's a basketball game, those little handhelds, which were before the Game Boy. Well, it's hard to believe how far we've advanced from that, and it's hard to believe how far Nintendo has advanced from when they started with the Game Boy and whatever portable system before that, from going from the Game Boy to the Game Boy Color to the Game Boy Advance, and to go into the Game Boy Advance SP to, well, here's the Advance right here. They go on, like I said, to the SP, then to the thinner SP, till finally they hit the DS Lite, which is the one I have, the DSi, and now the 3DS. It's hard to believe. And then you take a look at the competition. Sega used to have the Game Gear, Atari used to have the Lynx, TurboGrafx used to have the Turbo Express or something like that. I'm not really sure. The Turbo on the Go deal. Sony, well, they had the PSP. Now they have the PSP on the Go. I mean, a lot has changed. And now, as of recently in the past month or so, here in North America, everybody's that had a 3D, that had a DS or a DSi or even a DSi XL, have now, if they could afford it, jumped into 3DS land, which is hard to believe. And now Nintendo's going to have people taking the next step by having them jump into a system which is supposedly, like I say, being reported to be much stronger graphic-wise, RAM-wise, and gigabyte-wise than 360 and PS3. It's supposed to handle the high definition even better. But the question is there going to be 3D? Nobody really knows. Nobody really knows, you see. Nobody really knows because Nintendo hasn't really confirmed it much. But the thing is, will there be 3D to it? Will there be 3D to it? We don't know. We don't know. Nobody knows. Nobody knows if there's going to be 3D. But apparently, it's supposed to be better. There have been some pictures that have popped up, but nobody really knows. But you know what? Again, it just shows you how much we have come from that standard Nintendo box and that mega system of Sega's all the way to what we are now. And when you think about it, it's almost like we're starting all over again. Because Nintendo, with the Wii 2 being presented, from what we understand, at E3 this year, Nintendo is basically setting the bar again. But here's the thing. Can the 360, can Xbox, Microsoft, and Sony with the PlayStation, live up to it? Can they jump that high? Can they hit that bar? Can they surpass that bar that Nintendo is supposed to be raising again with the announcement of the new Wii? We don't know. There have been reports that people have been saying that Xbox has a new system plan, that Microsoft has a new Xbox plan. Some call it the Xbox, some names have come up like the Xbox 720 or the Xbox Phoenix. Things like that. PlayStation, well, we know obviously what they're going to do. If they want to surpass what Nintendo's setting with this announcement at E3, they're going to basically go from PS3 to PS4. That's what they'll do. Hard to believe that's true, but Give them time, and they will go from the PS3 to the PS4. Because again, just like back in the 80s, Nintendo set the standard. They set the bar, they raised the bar. Even when it looked like Sega was whooping their ass in 16-bit land, what happened? Nintendo came back and proved that they could raise the bar when they introduced Donkey Kong Country for Super Nintendo. There you go. And when they introduced the Super Game Boy cartridge, which allowed you to play your Game Boy cartridges on television. They basically set the standard, folks, in all of that. And then, when they went to the 64, and then when Sega did everything they could to surpass Nintendo, to try to surpass that bar Nintendo had set again, by bringing out all the attachments from a 32X to a Sega CD attachment, to finally just saying, you know, fuck it, let's just bring out the Sega Saturn. The only people that ever surpassed the bar or even got to the bar that Nintendo set was Sony when they brought out the PlayStation. But again, even with that, Nintendo somehow set the bar again with the 64. Yeah, the graphics weren't as good as what you saw on the Sony, and some of the games on the 64 weren't that good, according to many. The thing was still, Sony had basically surpassed that bar at the time with the PlayStation. But when Nintendo hit with the Game Boy, with the GameCube, around the same time that Sony had just introduced the PS2 and Microsoft was getting into the mix, what do you think happened? Again, Nintendo somehow set the bar. But again, PlayStation 2, PlayStation, Sony got evened it up. And then when the Xbox came out, they evened it up, and there was a three-way dance. If you were a three-way dance, a battle for supremacy. Now there were times Sony took the lead, Microsoft took the lead, and Nintendo took the lead. It was back and forth. It was like a ratings war on television. It's like a ratings war on television, folks. That's what it was like. It was a ratings war. And nobody really won that war yet until Nintendo sets the bar. Again. About the time that the 360 was announced, Nintendo had already announced the Wii. And even though the 360 was being advertised as a better system, Nintendo again set the bar because they allow people to interact instead of just using a controller. Just sitting down and doing it, they allow people to interact. And they set the bar. And even though again, there have been times when Nintendo has been like this, and like this, and like this, and back and forth with Sony and Microsoft, they again set the bar on many occasions. They have set the bar. There's no doubt about it. When they added the motion part, the Motion Plus, that set the bar again, and that's what caused Sony to do the move. And I'll be back in a second.